Oklahoma City Thunder select Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga University.
What a pass. Giddey underneath for JRE. The reverse and the rookie-to-rookie action. SGA defended closely by Westbrook. Tough. Step back. Gets up the shot. Banks it in for the lead.
This is Udart. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, and welcome to the Uncontested podcast. Coming to you guys live Monday, April 10th with a special episode. I'm your host, Jacob Niffen, and with me today, I've got my guy, Mason Ginsberg, who covers the New Orleans Pelicans for Boot Crew Media, and he's on the NO or no. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that, Mason. I probably should have asked before we started. What do you say, in the NO, or do you say in the no?
In the know. Come on.
In the know. And the In the Know podcast. He is all things New Orleans Pelicans basketball. Mason, thank you so much for hopping on, dude. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Good to be. Well, I say good to be here. Good to be talking to you. I'm not sure if Pelicans fans would agree that it's good to be here in this play-in game, but we'll get there. Man, going into Sunday, correct me if I'm wrong, Mason. Going into Sunday, there was a chance that the Pelicans could be fifth. Yeah.
Is that right? And
that's right.
Destined for a date with the Phoenix Suns again. Instead, all the way down to ninth, although the game that you and covered and your team that you cover played yesterday, probably the most eventful game of the day, at least.
Suns gave the Clippers, the C team Suns gave the Clippers a run for their money for a while, but I think everyone knew what the inevitable conclusion of that was going to be. And so, I mean, going down the stretch of that game in the last few minutes, you already knew that the Suns had lost, and so the Pelicans were only playing for eighth, which lessened the sting a little bit, but still kind of tough way to wrap that last game.
Definitely. Well, at least you don't got guys throwing punches on the bench. I think we both at least have that positive going for us.
Yeah.
So, Mason, before we dive into breaking down this 9-10 play-in matchup that will take place in New Orleans Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Central Time, I wanted to start off. So you cover the Pelicans. You are not a Thunder guy at all. But I figured we could start off. I want you to give a few positives that you've seen, things that you like. They don't have to be like intricate basketball stuff, right? You could just say Josh Giddey's hair is nice, right? But a few positives about Oklahoma City. I will return the favor as an olive branch on things that I enjoy about the New Orleans Pelicans before we really start to dissect this game.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, before we get into any players, I love that OKC went for this. Like, the fact that they're in the play-in is awesome. And it's not like Utah could have, right? Like, Utah could be in the spot that Oklahoma City is in. They clearly made it clear their schedule of the close season was really hard. All right. So I'm not saying that they underachieved by any stretch, but they were within striking distance for a while, and I think you kind of got the sense that they really didn't care that much about getting here. OKC, not at all. I mean, I think the outside looking in was expected that this would be another rebuilding year. Not to say I don't think OKC was projected to be anywhere near the bottom of the standings, obviously, but I mean, there was a wide range, I think, of expectations for where they could end up. And the fact that they're in this position to play some postseason basketball is really awesome. And I'm glad they're there. Like, I'm so much happier that OKC's in this spot than Dallas for a number of reasons. But, beyond that, I think about some of the individual matchups between these two teams. And, I mean, I'm not sure what I need to say about Shai that y'all, I'm sure, haven't already said. But he's going to be a problem for the Pelicans. His ability to draw contact, get to the line. The Pelicans have, we'll talk about the Jonas situation and who the heck is going to play center. But I'm very curious to see what they do to try to keep him off of the free throw line, mostly because the Pelicans can't afford. I think for anyone who kind of watched any part of the Timberwolves game, the Pelicans aren't very deep right now as far as guys they trust. And so if anyone gets into foul trouble, it's not a good thing for them, which is a very strong departure from earlier in the season where the Pelicans really, the depth was their calling card. They've had so many guys who contributed at a high level. I think the last thing I would say is he's obviously had an impact for the Thunder throughout the season, but Lu Dort, you look at the on-off numbers for him against the Pelicans specifically, and the guy is just, when he's playing, the Thunder are beating the Pelicans. And so I imagine he's going to draw the Brandon Ingram matchup. Same with Herb Jones on Shai. It's going to be really awesome to kind of cross-matching, watching those two situations unfold. But that's another thing I'm really curious about, how the Pelicans can really create some separation for BI and kind of let him do his thing without Dort smothering him. And so I think all those very get ourselves ready for should be a very fun matchup between these two teams. So I mean, all their games, the last one, I guess, notwithstanding, but all their games this season besides the most recent one have been very close. And so I expect the same thing.
All within, I think, 4 points. From my perspective, for the Pelicans, a really fun team that I had as like a Western Conference Finals contender preseason. Obviously, injuries play a massive role in that, which is unfortunate. But, man, Mason, I got to tell you, up until about probably late January, I was sitting here. We would get on this podcast, and before we would go live, we would kind of talk about what's going on in the NBA. And I would just sit here and think, the Pelicans, this damn team, is going to get Victor Wembanyama from the Los Angeles Lakers, and I'm going to be so pissed off that they're going to have both Zion and Wemby now that that pick swap much more like together, so it's not going to be a huge swing in either way. Although you never know what happens with lottery odds, but I thought you guys were going to land another like top 5 pick per the Lakers, and I was just like, man. Number one, like, shout out to New Orleans, because that's incredible. But just a lot of the young guys you all have as well. I like players that really just get after it, have, quote unquote, have that dog in them. And one of my favorite Pelicans memories from this season was the Rising Stars Challenge, and seeing Jose Alvarado just go berserk and like hit that game winner, and just the passion he plays with. And I feel like a lot of guys in New Orleans have that, like the Trey Murphy breakout this year. That dude freaking kills. He's awesome. So I think New Orleans has a really fun team that I could see over the next half decade kind of mirroring the Thunder, as far as they have all the pieces to continue like a meteoric rise up the Western Conference as teams like Golden State and the Lakers and the Clippers kind of age out. And so I think it's a really fun team, and I think it's going to be a really fun matchup. I will tell you, I was rooting for New Orleans to win Sunday night because I would have much rather have played the Minnesota Timberwolves, especially after Jaden McDaniels got in a fight with the wall and the wall won. I felt a lot better about that matchup, but here we are. No. So, Mason, let's start off with the Pelicans lineup. You mentioned earlier in the season the bench was a great contributor for this team. Now they're kind of short on the bench. They have some injuries. What does the lineup look like for you Wednesday night? Are the Pels going to go with 8 guys, 9 guys? What's the short list of guys they trust, and what does that minutes allocation kind of look like?
Yeah, well, I think you have to use the most recent game as the barometer here. And if that's the case, then it's an 8-man rotation. And even that is pushing it, because you've got your starting 5, which is about where the confidence probably ends, with CJ, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, and Jonas. Beyond that, the guys that Willie Green went to were Josh Richardson, played 29 minutes. Najee Marshall played 12 minutes. And then Larry Nance played 17. And those were painful minutes, not because I'm a big Larry Nance fan, but the guys, he seems a little broken down. I mean, like he came back from an injury before when other players would have sat. And you can kind of see that he's just, he was kind of laboring up down the court. Willie mentioned the post-game press conference after the Minnesota game that he took him out because it looked like something was bothering him. So I don't really know what version of Larry Nance we're going to get on Wednesday. And if that's the case, I don't really know what to tell you beyond, I know Josh Richardson's in the rotation, and I would expect Najee Marshall's in the rotation. Dyson Daniels was in that rotation every game up until the last one on Sunday. So I think Willie just tightened it up and took him out just because it was a game they felt like they had to win. But that's really what you're looking at. I mean, I don't think there'll be any surprises unless if Larry Nance can't go, I would expect that Willie goes to Jackson Hayes, who played playoff minutes for the Pelicans against the Suns last season. So it seems like the intuitive choice, but I think that's pretty much it. I don't really see anyone else cracking the rotation unless Dyson gets back in.
Interesting. I really like Dyson Daniels a lot. We have a comment over here in the chat that says they were high on Daniels during last year's draft. Same. I think Dyson Daniels is a great long-term piece for New Orleans. The Jackson Hayes angle actually kind of interests me. Jackson Hayes caused some problems for OKC in a couple of games this season just because the Thunder don't have somebody that large and that athletic to really hang with him. I specifically remember, I think it was the last game right before Christmas when New Orleans came to Oklahoma City, and the Thunder were in a great position to win that game, but Jackson Hayes kind of turned the tide.
Points.
Yeah. Maybe the best game of Jackson Hayes' career. I don't know. But a lot of offensive rebounds, putbacks, lobs that the Thunder just struggled to defend. So that angle is actually kind of interesting to me, knowing the recent history with him. You talked about the Sunday game and kind of using that as a barometer. Going back before the Sunday game, though, let's say maybe 2 weeks or so, how are the Pelicans trending? Like, for instance, Minnesota is kind of like limping into that 7-8 matchup. Quite literally, they also probably have some casts on some hands. If Dallas made it, they definitely would have been limping into the play-in. Where does New Orleans fall with that? Have they been on a hot streak? Is it just kind of middle ground? What have you seen?
I think it depends on who you ask, because if you look at just the record over the last couple of weeks, it's a hot streak. I mean, but if you kind of peel back the onion a little bit, they're beating a bunch of bad teams, and the Clippers. I think, there's reason for optimism, cautious optimism as far as, but I think the problem and what's been going on with the Pelicans really ever since Zion's injury is that they struggle against good defenses. This team struggles to create offense when it's not kind of spoon-fed to them. They've got a couple really good isolation players in Brendan Ingram and CJ McCollum. They've got a really, really good floor spacer in Trey Murphy, who's becoming more than that. But the offense, like when you look at the Pelicans' season-long statistics, they're a top 10 defensive team and like a 20th offensive team, which seals backwards when you look at the roster, right? Like you would expect the opposite, with Herb Jones being the only guy you point to and saying that guy gets stops. But really, the team, credit to Willie Green that the team has bought in defensively and like they can interchange players and still have success. On the other end, though, there's a lot of questions to be asked about the overall offensive game plan for the Pelicans, because good defenses grind them to a halt and it gets ugly. And so that's why I kind of say it depends on who you ask, because they've won the games they're supposed to win. That's something that they've done all season, minus the stretch in January without both Ingram and Zion. But against good defenses, this team has frequently struggled. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so curious about this matchup on Wednesday night.
Very good. The Thunder, you talked about beating teams that are worse than the Pelicans, and they're winning the games they were supposed to. The Thunder had a chance to climb up, possibly even to 6 after a huge win out in LA as well. The night that Paul George got injured, came home for what I argued on this podcast, the easiest stretch of the season, a stretch that you had to dominate. Who'd they play? Portland. When Portland started sitting everybody, they played Detroit, Charlotte, and the Indiana Pacers with no Miles Turner, no Tyrese Halliburton. And Thunder go 2-2 on that stretch, which just felt like a monumental letdown. Almost 1-3 if J-Dub doesn't tip in a last-second missed shot, like not even last half second to beat Detroit. So I almost feel like it's the opposite with the Thunder. They're kind of limping in here. The last game that the starters played Thursday night against the Utah Jazz, I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander looked like he was struggling just to get up and down the court. Just so many miles on those legs this summer or this season. I believe he and Josh Giddey have both played 500 more minutes this year than they did last year. So this team kind of running out of gas. So them getting to rest Sunday, you said you're going to use Sunday's game as a barometer for the Pelicans rotation. Definitely can't do that with OKC. They sat everybody. But hopefully that rest for them, at least that allows them to have a little bit fresher legs coming into this night. So what do you think the team mindset is? Like, obviously it's got to be a letdown getting 9th instead of 5th. Like that's a massive slide in one day. But what is the mindset of this team? Like, do you think they're dejected or let down that it's only the 9th seed and it's another uphill climb like last year fighting through the play-in? Or is it hey, we haven't had Zion for most of the year and we're still here. We're happy to be here and we're giving it our best shot?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think I really do believe that they're going to look. Willie Green got them through this exact same situation last year. I really believe that they're going to come, and they don't want their season to end on their home floor. I can say that pretty confidently, because it's got to be like that one game at a time mentality, right? Because you don't want to lose that game on your home floor against OKC. Then next game, you certainly, assuming the Lakers take care of business against Minnesota, which is an assumption. It's not. It's definitely not. Especially with Gobert out, I think Minnesota could bomb threes left and right, and we could be looking at an upset. But if we assume that that Pelicans would win and would play Minnesota at Minnesota again, they're going to remember what happened on Sunday, and they're not going to want that to happen again either, right? And then if you get there to the 8th seed against Denver, Denver is one of those teams that, weirdly enough, the Pelicans did okay even without Zion against the Nuggets. So as a player, I mean, I'm not talking to myself as upsetting the Nuggets as a 1 seed without Zion, but as a player, sure, like you can and should be as a competitor thinking that way. And so I really do think that this one game at a time mentality is going to create a let's go get this. And Willie Green is you can say some good and not so good things about him as a coach, but he gets his players ready as far as like kind of mentally. I think that's something you saw last year in the play-in, and I think that the players trust him and believe in him. And so I do expect that they'll be ready to go for this game. I'm more questioning about how the rotations shake out and how they attack that, but we'll get there.
Definitely. It's I've wondered, the Thunder, the players have very much wanted to make the play-in this year. They've been outspoken about it. But for them, I feel like it's almost like playing with house money. Like, you weren't supposed to be here. Now you're here. You're not at home. You're on the road.
It's a Pels last year. Same thing.
Exactly. If you win, hell yeah, that's awesome. And if you don't, it was still a wildly successful season, and you still get a lottery pick. So this kind of just feels like the cherry on top for the season. With that being said, I can't speak for the Thunder, but for myself personally, like, I want them to win, right? Like, I want them to win because this podcast will have a hell of a lot more downloads if they win versus if they lose. 3 things the Pelicans got to do to win this game. You've kind of talked about the rotations, the inverse of the defense versus the offense and what's expected. If there were like 3 specific things the Pelicans have to do or dominate in this game to get this win, what would you say they are?
I think they've got to lean into Jonas a little bit more, I think, especially given the fact that Larry Nance doesn't look like he's fully healthy. And that's been one of the bigger gripes from a lot of folks this year. Is they've turned Jonas into an afterthought, really, in the offense. And so where last year, he was a key part to their success, even with Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, it's looked the other way this year. And so Willie Green tends to be very, very hesitant to go to him when opponents play small lineups, regardless of how good the opposing small lineup is. And so, like, it took, I live in Michigan now, and I was at the Pistons versus Pelicans game, and I remember it vividly. It took deep into the 4th quarter because Willie Green does not like to close with Jonas. He closes with Larry Nance all the time. The Pistons were starting Nerlens Noel that game, and Jonas was cooking him all game long. And it really took that game getting down to like 3 points, 4 points difference before Willie went back and said, feed the big man, feed this guy. He's getting buckets in every possession. And so I just don't have a lot of confidence that that's going to happen because it hasn't happened all season. Where I think the Pelicans kind of went astray against the Wolves is Towns had 5 fouls the entire 4th quarter. Willie Green went to Josh Richardson and played small, kind of played Herb Jones at the 5 with Townsend because he thought Jonas was going to get to blitz on the defensive side. And so if he does that again, I have similar concerns because closing with Josh Richardson is not. I mean, he's a bench player. He's a role player, and so that's one thing. Herb Jones has to stay out of foul trouble. Especially with Dyson Daniels likely out of the rotation. The next guy up you pretty much have is Najee, and I mean Shai is just too good. I mean, I think Herb Jones becomes so important as an individual defender, and given the Shai's ability to draw contact and get to the line, that's something they've got to watch out for. And the last thing is just they've got to manufacture high quality shots, and so the tendency when things get tough is for Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum to go isolation and take these tough mid-range jumpers. And so not to say that I'm totally against BI getting into the mid-range and taking when he's in the paint, taking kind of those short mid-range shots and rising up over guys, that's money. I mean, it's kind of one of those when you're 1 step, 2 steps in from the 3-point line, taking these fall away, these really tough shots. And it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not Ingram's fault because the team's just not doing a good job of setting him up for success. But they've really, they've got to have guys, they've got to be able to create a good shot profile. And, they've been near the bottom of the league for a lot of the season in 3-point attempts. That can't happen. You've got to have CJ, BI, and Trey Murphy getting threes up, or else you're going to be looking at a math problem against most teams you face. And so that's, I think the last thing I'd point to.
Interesting. Let's circle back around to the Jonas Valanciunas stuff because I was thinking about this as well, and I kind of had in my outline here. I looked up these stats. 4 games between these two teams this season. Jonas averages 22 minutes a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder, who start a 6'9" rookie, second-round rookie, Jalen Williams, out of Arkansas. I mean, as far as size-wise, especially currently in the rotation, the Thunder have nobody to match up against Jonas. I mean, Will do his best and try to draw some charges and wall up. But the Thunder are undoubtedly going to play small. That's what they've done all season long. I didn't think that was originally their plan, but once the Chet foot injury happened, they pivoted. I mean, before Kenrich Williams got hurt, they were playing 6'6" Kenrich Williams at center for 20 minutes a game. They were starting this man, starting center, Kenrich Williams, inside the circle for the jump ball. Like, it was ridiculous. But they were able to space the floor offensively. They were to scramble defensively and make it work. Jonas is one of my biggest worries in this game because if the Pelicans do stay with him, I mean, the Thunder are going to have to double, triple down to get the ball out of his hands just because they don't have the size to defend him. You mentioned you don't really have confidence in that. So is that just a defensive thing for Jonas on why they pull him off? I know you were the one who tweeted the quote from Willie Green yesterday that he basically said they wanted to match Minnesota's small ball. And my thought was, if they want to match Oklahoma City small ball, please, let's do that because that's exactly what the Thunder want.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it just comes down to is Willie Green going to look at Shai and say, well, Jonas is going to get cooked in the pick and roll, and so I'm not going to let that happen. Because if you do that, then you're negating potentially your biggest advantage of the game, which is, with Jonas, because like you said, Thunder have no one to match up with him. And so, I am very it's going to be very interesting to see how they play this out. And I mean, I look at how Jonas has done against Thunder this season. The most recent game is tough because Ingram was out and Zion was out, right? And so that's I don't want to point to that one to point as a strong negative to the Pelicans. So when Ingram or Zion were healthy, those games were all really close, competitive. But the fact that you had no Zion, no Brandon Ingram, and Jonas still played 16 minutes in that most recent Thunder game. I mean, Najee Marshall had 7 turnovers and he played 36 minutes. So I just have a hard time understanding what rationale to go with guys versus benching guys are. And so I literally have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like you mentioned, I mean, do you want to have the advantage on the offensive end and then possibly let Shai cook in coming off screens and getting in isolation with someone like Jonas, or do you go smaller and match the Thunder, which is what they want to do? It's going to be a really interesting kind of push and pull with this game. I think a lot of Thunder fans are really worried about Herb Jones. I think if I had to make a list of like the top 3 guys that defend Shai the best this year, Herb Jones is number 1 on that list. And I'm sure a lot of players probably feel like they don't like to go up against Herb Jones. Just the size, the length, the versatility. He's a freaking monster. What are some of the other, besides Shai just being Shai, and I believe Shai has his career high against the Pelicans earlier this year, albeit in a loss. He went for 44 on like 17 of 29 or something like that. It was a really good night for Shai. What are some other aspects or factors besides the small ball, maybe players from the Thunder that you're worried about maybe giving the Pelicans some problems?
Honestly, it kind of all starts and ends with him. I mean, because he's a James Harden type figure that just collapses defenses, right? And so, I mean, I just kind of look and I think the Pelicans have been good defending the 3-point line this year and allowing the right players to get 3-point looks. And so the Thunder haven't been able to burn the Pelicans a ton from deep this year. I worry about that because I just, I don't know if regression hits and if they're going to give the wrong guy space, because it was, I mean, I think 3 of their 4 games, they were shooting like, they were making 1 and 3 or worse right around there. And so I think that's the ultimate equalizer is the 3-point line. And so the Pelicans got outscored by a massive amount against the Timberwolves, and it was a big part of why they lost the game. And so I think I'm less concerned about the individual matchups outside of Shai. I mean, because I don't think anyone's really burned the Pelicans consistently enough for me to point to anyone.
For sure.
I mean, Jalen Williams has had a couple of really good games against Pelicans recently, but I don't expect the Pelicans to, like, the game plan has to be around neutralizing Shai. It just has to be. And so, like, the most recent game, Herb Jones had 5 fouls, and he was a foul trouble the whole game. And they're in big trouble if that happens again.
Definitely. One Pelican that needs to step up, have a big game if they want to advance to the second round of the play-in. If you had to choose one guy, like we assume BI is going to go off because BI is just insane. You mentioned, I think Lou Dort will get that Brandon Ingram matchup. The problem there is Lou is 6'4", and Ingram is what, 6'10", 6'11"? Like, Lou can be physical and try to keep him from his spot, but you can shoot over him. So we assume BI is going to have a good night, but who is one of these role players, one of these guys that has to have a good game in order for the Pelicans to close this thing out?
Yeah, I mean, Trey Murphy, that's got to be the guy. I mean, it's easy to say CJ because CJ he's had a few rough games down the stretch, but I really think they've got to get Trey Murphy shooting. He's got it. I think I would go so far as to say he needs to be top 3 on the Pelicans in field goal attempts for them to win this game. And that's me hedging a little bit on Jonas and expecting him not to play as much as I want him to play. But Trey Murphy has been an insanely efficient player the entire season. He's over at 40% 3-point shooting, 90% from the line. I mean, and he's been scoring in other ways besides just, he's not a spot up 3-point shooter. He's more than that. And so they've got to involve him. It can't be your turn, my turn between CJ and Brandon. And to Brandon's credit, when he's at his best, he's been an awesome facilitator. He's made some incredible passes over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so I believe that he'll look for Trey, but the Pelicans have to make sure that they set him up for success. I don't want to see CJ McCollum and Josh Richardson mid-range jumpers with 15 seconds left on the shot clock. They've got to work to get the really good shots as opposed to just taking their early shot. Definitely.
One of my thoughts in this matchup, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't watch the Pelicans. That's why I'm asking you this, Mason. Mm-hmm. I've kind of looked at it as there are 3 guys you got to worry about with New Orleans. You mentioned shut down Shai, and then the rest of the stuff kind of falls in place. For me, it's CJ, BI, and Trey Murphy. And if you can slow those three down, that's majority of the Pelicans offense right there. That's what the Thunder should focus on. Not letting Trey Murphy get open threes, not letting CJ get open threes, and just fighting tooth and nail against BI to not let him get to his spots or making him work to get to those spots.
Yep.
If you were looking at this from the other side of the coin, from the Thunder perspective, is that kind of where you would go with this matchup? Focus on those three, and if Josh Richardson or Larry Nance or somebody else beats you, then that's what it is. But those are the three you got to worry about.
I think it's hard to do that and have success with any team. To key on three guys. If I was OKC, I would let BI cook, honestly, and focus on making sure CJ and Trey can't get any separation on the 3-point line. Because then what you've got is Ingram not able to find guys, find good passing lanes, not able to find guys for good scoring opportunities. And then he's going to, he may feel like and because the offense tends to be not overly simplistic sometimes, he might just end up going to isolation BI mode, which could, he could get hot. I mean, he definitely did. He has at times this year. But I think if you fight like hell to make sure that CJ and Trey aren't getting loose, you're going to make things a lot harder for the Pelicans and for BI to be a scorer and a facilitator.
Interesting.
And then we'll see what the hell happens with Jonas.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mason, last thing before we get out of here, we got to get the official prediction. Who wins? Do you got a score? Do you have a player of the game? Doesn't have to be anything specific as far as like one of those things, just a few predictions for this game.
Yeah, I am taking the Pelicans in this one. I see someone in the comments mentioning that the refs will swallow their whistle in the postseason as they usually do. I'm hoping that's the case for a couple reasons. One, obviously Shai is one of the best foul jars in the league. Second is Jonas, I feel like got a really tough whistle against Minnesota. I feel like they weren't calling things fairly. I'm not saying that that the refereeing was skewed towards Minnesota over New Orleans. I think for Jonas specifically, he got kind of mauled on one end, and then was getting a couple of touch foul calls on the other end. It just didn't seem right. And so I think that will also benefit him. And so I think if that happens, the Pelicans can win this one. But I really do think if the Pelicans try to go small, if Jonas plays under 20 minutes, under 25 minutes, it's going to take another Jackson Hayes random blow-up game for the Pelicans to win this one. So, I am putting a little bit of faith in Willie Green deciding to go to Jonas just because of the lack of available options. I have no idea. Again, Larry Nance, I'm not sure what his status is going to be. I assume he'll play. I just know he's not going to be 100%. He's just, again, worn down from the season and some nagging injuries. And so, we'll see. There's a lot of variables that could impact the outcome here that really go beyond just raw player skill sets,
Definitely. 100%. Mason, thank you so much for coming on, man. Before we get out of here, will you plug and tell everybody where they can find all of your stuff that you do for the New Orleans Pelicans?
Yeah, sure. So not really in the writing, blogging game anymore, but I'm part of the Boot Crew Media Network. I was actually, Schmidt and I, as my co-host for the In the Know podcast, we were with Blue Wire for a while, had a great experience with them. We joined about a year ago onto Boot Crew Media, which is the local sports network. They're doing all, basketball, football, all the works. And so you can find a lot of great content on their platform, all over YouTube, as well as just the podcast that Schmidt and I co-host. That's my main thing these days. So definitely check it out if you're interested.
Awesome. Mason, thanks so much. Looking forward to an awesome game on Wednesday night. You guys can follow Mason on Twitter. He is just at Mason Ginsberg. The header is my favorite part of Mason's profile. The king of Pelicans trolls for 5 years.
The Crown Prince.
The Crown Prince. Apologies.
One day I'll tell you the story about that.
I cannot wait. So you guys go follow Mason for great New Orleans Pelicans coverage. It would be a great follow during the game to kind of get the Pelicans perspective of how things are going. Mason, have a great one. Enjoy the game. And with all due respect, hopefully I will be doing another one of these ones and you will not. I tease. Have a good one, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you got it.